Generally, all brands have a different range of constraints, but it all comes back to kind of the source of data. When your Shopify dashboard says one thing, your Triple Whale says another thing, your Store Hero says another thing, the first source is to, can I get right the sales? Can we just start at the sales? Can I work my way down that P&L? And can we see true margins that actually match in, say, Xero or QuickBooks as much as they do on the dashboards that most founders look at?
It's the e-commerce master plan podcast, here to help you solve your marketing problems and grow your e-commerce business. Cutting through the hype to bring you inspiration and advice from the e-commerce sector and beyond. Here's your host, Chloe Thomas.
Hello and welcome. It's great to have you here. Thank you for hitting play and choosing to listen to one of our inspiring guests. In this episode, we're doing one of our WWYD episodes. Yes, it's What Would You Do time. These are the episodes where we get an expert in the industry to come on and take us through a scenario and what they would do if they were faced with that scenario. This time, we're going financy. Yes, for the first ever time, we are donating an entire episode to the subject of e-commerce finance. Not something, when we've done selling your business, we've done buying a business, but we've never done the finances of running your business. So our guest today is going to be answering the what would you do? That is, what would you do if you were brought in as CFO of a fast growth DTC brand? And I'm really looking forward to this. And I know you're really going to like listening to it because we get into some really good nitty gritty stuff that even if you try and avoid finance like the plague, you're going to get a lot out of this. You're going to like it. You're going to find finance less scary and you're going to get some great ideas for improving the performance of your business. So make sure you listen to the end of the episode so you don't miss out on my guest's top tips because they're particularly good as well. And you'll also get my own take on the episode. And now to introduce our special guest. Dan Major is a fractional CFO for D2C fashion, footwear and beauty brands, focused on scaling profitability by unlocking margin and freeing up cash for ads and stock. Hello, Dan.
Hello, nice to see you.
Very cool to have you here on the show. How did you get into the world of e-commerce before we go completely finance crazy?
I've always worked in brands. I had one quite painful year in insurance, which very, very quickly confirmed to me that is not where my future lie. So most of my career has been in various different brands, as big as Gucci and as small as 7-figure brands, and always in finance. And bit by bit, I focused more and more on e-commerce. I eventually had an e-commerce function reporting in under me, and I kind of found that link between finance, marketing and operations, which is fairly unique in D2C brands. I saw quite a few brands make some pretty terrible decisions because they weren't really taking note of their financials, their unit economics. And I thought I could make an impact there. I could provide that finance strategy lens and specifically help D2C first brand founders.
I have to say, having worked with many different e-commerce and supplier side businesses over the years, of having the agency, doing the consulting, doing all the various bits and pieces I've done, working in-house, etc. If a brand has a quality, good finance director, finance team, it makes such a difference. The good ones are like the marketing heroes. The marketing team love the good finance people because everybody's speaking the same numbers. And It's like whenever I approach a brand and they're like, "Oh, we try not to talk to finance," I'm like, "Oh shit," It's like, "Oh no, this one we've got big problems here because if finance and marketing and finance and e-commerce aren't getting on." Yeah. Then someone's been hired badly.
Yeah. And it's natural. Brand founders normally come from, or more often than not, come from a product background. They want to be involved in the product. That's what drew them into it in the first place. Sometimes a marketing background as well. Very rarely do they come from a finance and operations background. So a lot of the time they come to me when there's a need, but they actually don't love finance. And that's fine. I'm well aware of that. But if you can have a finance person that can talk NCAC and halo effect across channels as easily as they can financials, then you're probably in the right place, and you can actually you're able to actually link those parts together.
So let's imagine you're starting as the CFO at a fast-growing D2C brand who is not doing all the right things? You know, you're kind of their first serious finance person coming on board, because that's your what would you do? What would you do if you were brought in as a CFO of a fast-growing D2C brand? Where do you start?
So generally, all brands have a different range of constraints. So there's different areas that can be impacting individual brands. But it all comes back to kind of the source of data. And I realize probably you hear that a lot of the time, very natural thing for a finance person to say. But when your Shopify dashboard says one thing, your TripleWhale says another thing, your Store Hero says another thing, and Amazon payouts are so vastly different from the Amazon broker sellers that you think you're getting. There's so many obscured fees and payouts. The first source is to get right. Can I get right the sales? Can we just start at the sales? Can I work my way down that P&L and get that? Can we see true margins that actually match in, say, Xero or QuickBooks as much as they do on the dashboards that most founders are looking at and pressing refresh 150 times a day on Shopify? A lot of the time they don't. They're missing core things, but it could be as simple as sales tax or a VAT or something, or it could be payouts or fees are missing. So a recent example, the high growth 7-figure a month D2C brand I was working with, and their third-party analysis tool, it was telling them they were making 15% contribution margin. But actually, when I immediately pulled up their Xero financials, and they were completely break-even at that level. And so there's complete gap. And it turned out they just had not set up this tool correctly. But then that was masking other things because it completely changed their net average order value, it completely changed the margins they were making. And it's a case of just making sure that are the tools you're using coming up with the same figures across the board. That's probably the initial starting point before you even start making decisions on the rest of it.
Is it feasible to have a third-party reporting tool in, I guess, the ad space, you know, something like a TripleWhale, exactly matching your QuickBooks or Xero accounting piece? Because in my experience, you know, as the marketer, you're better at the numbers than I am because you're in finance. But as a marketer, it's like, so long as we know they're all trying, I've always taken the approach, so long as we know they're all trying to report in the same way, i.e. we have included VAT, we have included costs, the right costs where we need to include the right costs, then I'm okay with differences because of cookie lengths and reporting time windows and all this kind of stuff. But are you striving for a May 2026, exactly the same on every single platform? Are you striving for numbers you can trust in every platform that are telling the same story?
No, I'm not striving for perfection. A lot of the time, you could end up creating a cottage industry in finance well before, you know, you'd end up, by that point, you've hired 6 different roles just to try and keep track of all the channels. And you become, as I said, it's a cottage industry and far too much cost involved. You're looking for something reliable that you can trust. And if it turns out that by the time you added in every single fee or into a third party like a TripleWhale or Store Hero, and it's slightly off, it's still, as long as you can spot that difference and it's regularly the same amount out, you can still use that as a kind of a run rate for the month. You can still see, right, I have a good feeling that, you know, it might come in and say total sales, and I know that net sales is going to be lower than that. But actually, as long as I can trust that what it's showing as MER or ROAS, or that I can trust the net sales coming through, I'm going to have a reasonable idea of what their unit economics are going to look like. So I can get good enough. And that's what you need probably at 7 figures. Maybe when you're 8 figures, you're funded, you've got a kind of maybe a private equity owners that you need to have everything exact, then fine. You need to then you're paying for the team. But at this point here, it's about having good enough and being able to move forward with it quickly.
So we're trying to get to that point where the founder can refresh in their pretty tool as many times as they like during the month, be pretty confident that when they have their catch up with Dan, their CFO, at the end of the month, there's not going to be a, oh my God, what did we do moment, because it's close enough.
And that moment happens in 100 million companies as much as it happens in 5 million companies. There is countless times that you're going to get caught out because of something changed, or there's a one-off, or a certain connection to an ad partner dropped, or something happened where that was the case. But the majority of the time, you can get it close enough that you can start to learn to have a level of trust. And that gives both sides, that almost gives that live dashboard approach, but also it also means you can course correct quicker. There's no point waiting to the 31st of the month, then going and letting the bookkeepers work on it for 15 days, and then having a meeting booked in with me on the 23rd of the month, and then finding out that actually something happened last month. You need to be able to react to something much quicker than that, especially in D2C. It's not a slow-moving industry. You need to, like, you're 6 or 8 weeks late by the time you actually make any changes then. So you need to be able to get live reporting and at least trust it's close, or get it to the point you can trust it's close.
So once you've got those kind of, I guess the numbers the brand are looking at working for you all, where do you go next?
So then I want to make sure from a unit economics perspective, and by that I mean if you sell one product, this one SKU, maybe you've got hero SKUs or so on. Oftentimes I'll find that most brands will have 2, 3, 4 SKUs that make up often 50% of their sales. So start there first. But if you sell one of this, where does it come on a product margin, a gross margin, and a contribution margin? And are you making money at that point? Because a lot of the time, that is where these various tools we were speaking out are hiding. And as I said, there's different constraints in different businesses, but ultimately speaking, before we fix anything else, are we actually making money on the sales we think we're making money on? So there's industry benchmarks. You can find out pretty quickly where you sit on that.
I'm not going to ask you to share benchmarks because we'll have to go down every vertical and it'll take us hours.
No.
But you mentioned 3 different types of margin there: gross margin, contribution margin, and another margin. Can you give us a very quick explanation of what those 3 are? Because I know at least some of the listeners are going, what, there's more than one margin?
Yeah, very, very quick. And I'm looking at them for different purposes. So after your revenue, you have your product margin. That's the cost it takes to get your product into your warehouse. So that's the cost of the product and maybe any inbound fees, inbound duties, and so on. That's useful because that's also the margin that might be used for wholesale later if you chose to go down that path. Okay, that's a strong margin. You want that to be quite high. Your gross margin is the next one, is what it costs to get it out to the customer. So it includes any Shopify selling fees, any Klarna fees, maybe any shipping and distribution costs, and that's, you've got it out to the customer. And then your contribution margin is your final variable margin. Overall, probably your most important margin as a D2C first brand, and that is after you include customer acquisition. Now, in the financials, it's a blended customer acquisition. So it's the blend between, you might actually find that on a brand new customer, you might look break even. But then obviously with the retention of customers, as long as your blended is looking good, you're still making money there.
Got you. And it's that customer acquisition part is once you get to the contribution margin. The last thing you add before, I think we should probably explain contribution as well, because that's still not your profit, is it, at this point?
No, that says your final variable margin is everything it costs to deliver and sell one unit to one customer. That is the contribution you've made off that one product. So it might be this 20%, and you put, sold something for £1 and you've collected 20%. You're still going to have all your fixed costs and operating costs off the bottom of that. And a lot of companies are very bloated there. So it's not quite your net profit before tax number, but it's the final number that you can impact with scale. So if I sell 10 of them, it's going to 10x this. If I sell 20 of them, it's going to 20x this. Whereas your bottom numbers, all the fixed numbers, they shouldn't increase at scale in the same way. And that's actually quite a good tactic if you're overweight on the bottom. As long as you've got profitable contribution margin, you can often scale out of that because your bottom numbers start getting smaller and smaller and smaller as an overall percentage.
It's kind of one of those things when people hit a difficult point, it's really easy to go, oh, we'll cut overheads. We'll see what money we can cut. But actually, for the amount of effort it takes to cut £1,000 of overhead, it probably takes less effort to increase sales by the amount that would bring in £1,000 worth of contribution. And of course, then you're on an upward trajectory. And I think that's often what people forget is that, yes, we've got a cash flow problem or a profit problem, but actually, if we can sell more, the level of overhead isn't a problem anymore.
Yeah, and that's totally true. You still, like later on, there'll still be elements of dealing with the cash side of things. Cash doesn't always follow the sale or the profit. But with an element of when you're trying to scale, you can't scale if your contribution margin is not decent. So there just isn't enough profit left over. So you have to fix those first, and then you can pour fuel on the top. And a big part of what I do is actually not trying to someone comes in and they're break even 0% at the final profit margin, net profit, I don't want to try and get them to 20%. I might want to make enough changes to get them to 10%, but then grow their ad spend, because they might only have been spending 20% on ad spend. I might want to get them up to 35%, because they can then outspend the rest of the competition, win the auctions, and so essentially that scaling piece is a lot easier if you're willing to outspend everyone else and have a higher CAC than everyone else. So from my perspective, I'm not looking to make someone the highest profit margin. I'm looking to say, well, can we get you to 7 figures a month at this contribution margin? And then, keep putting more into the ad spend and see if we can then outspend the next layer and the next layer and the next layer.
Yeah, so you're at that point where you're going, we've got X percentage points. Where are we going to deploy these? Is it going to be more marketing or is it going to be my pocket? Obviously, the growth answer is marketing spend, but clever marketing spend.
Yeah, there's stages of life, I guess. There are points that if you're in the year before you're going to sell, and you've done 3 or 4 years of growth, it might then be useful to focus on ramping up that bottom margin a little bit, because obviously any valuation will be based on that final number. So at different stages of life, if you're already at a size where you're happy with and you're not in a growth phase, then take a bit more of margin off the table, take money off the table. People keep expecting a big exit to solve things, but actually taking money off the table throughout it is also a wise move for the brand founder.
Okay, so you've got your accurate numbers feeding into all the different platforms. You've got a handle on those unit economics and all those different levels of margin. Now I figure you're going to need to start finding some impact to make. So how do you work out where to look? Is it always the same place for every brand? Are there different things you dive into? How do you find the place to make an impact after you've got all that accuracy in place?
You mentioned it earlier. So every vertical is slightly different, but broadly speaking, if you find in your vertical, your metrics of what you should be aiming for as a benchmark, you should be able to very quickly see where you're overweight. So, for example, if the whole industry in your vertical, if the whole industry is getting a 75 to 80% product margin cost, and you're only getting 60%, you're probably spending too much on your product. So you need to renegotiate with the factory. You need to find a cheaper method of making it, or equally raise the average order value, raise the RRP. Quite often you'll find that actually a company is spending far too much on distribution, far too much down the gross margin. And actually, it's not an issue specifically that they're overspending. They might, it might be for the size, the weight of the product that they're spending, that might be the right distribution cost. But if it's making up 20% of your margin, you can't go anywhere with that. So then what it might be is, well, why are you sending it for free? So maybe the point is you need a shipping income that could neutralize part of that. So the recent brand I said I worked with earlier, that 7 figures a month brand, they didn't have any shipping income. And actually, just by adding a shipping income, we added 4 percentage points to their margin. And we adjusted discounting down because they're giving away far too much in discounts, and got that from 12% to 8%. And there's another 4 percentage points there. And so we were able to find £8 or £9 of average order value on every single sale with no additional costs in the business. It won't always be that. You might already be covering those things, but there'll be somewhere in your P&L which is overweight. And if you look down it and your product margin is good, but your gross margin is terrible, it's in there. So it's like your selling fees or your distribution. If at gross margin you're still hitting 60%, 55% maybe for some industries, and you're down there, you're pretty solid, and you're against your vertical's benchmarks, you're doing solid there, but actually you're only getting 10% contribution margin, then something's gone haywire in your marketing, and you need to kind of pull back there. Maybe it's because you're in a growth phase, and therefore almost all of your marketing spend is on new CAC, not retention, and maybe there's something there to fix. But you can normally quite quickly spot where in the P&L you're overweight. Equally, same thing, you could be making 25% contribution margin, but if you're spending 30% on your operating costs and fixed costs, you're still going to be underwater. So then you maybe need to go and make some changes to your fixed costs, your headcounts, your subscriptions, the pieces below there. So it's about kind of spotting where you're heavy and then targeting the easiest, quickest fixes.
And you've mentioned already about redeploying some of that saved margin into more marketing spend. That's very easy to do flippantly, I suppose, but to do it well, How do you make sure that that's just not becoming a cost somewhere else in the P&L and is actually bringing in the right things without becoming the marketing person yourself?
So it's about having a really close relationship with the marketing person. So from that perspective, this is where brands don't need to use finance as kind of a cost-cutting exercise, but can use it. So it's not defensive. You can almost use it as an offensive utility. If we're happy with the net margin and they're not in a period of their life where they need to take particularly heavy dividends, or they're not in a period of life where they need to show a heavy net profit margin, then all of the savings we can make across the P&L, and you'll need them every year. Meta's 60% higher in the last 2 years, or everyone has a different statistic, something like that. But it's going to get more expensive next year and the year after. And your job is to keep finding enough spare margin, enough meat on the bone, that you can afford that next cost of CAC, that next every year. Because if your competitors can't, or if people in your space can't, then you're going to win those bids, you're going to win those sales. So every year you're going to have to find more and more. And it might be part of the RRP, it might be that you find savings, you might find that there's some easy wins go, and then it comes, it's RRP focus. But the aim then is, if the idea is scale is a growth, and then it's about saying, well, how much you spend. If you're already spending 40% on marketing spend, then we have an efficiency problem. Because if you can't find scale at 40% of net revenue on marketing, then you've got to deep dive that first. But a lot of brands were able to scale quite quickly on, say, 15% ad spend during COVID years. And that world is gone now. And they kind of, you talk to them and they say, well, why did I used to get that growth then? And it's just a different scenario. Maybe Meta and Google Ads got more wides to it and charging more, and it's a more saturated platform. If growth is the ambition, which is why it's really important to work out what the goals are, first of all, because if the goals are to milk profit, then that's a totally different game. But if scale is the goal, then it's about feeding that into marketing and then tracking each one. It's never linear. So you can't it's never quite linear to say, I'm going to put money into here and I'm going to get it up here, because obviously new CAC is more expensive than existing, like returning CAC, and you almost have to break through new levels, but you have to monitor it.
Love that answer. And the other thing, which people get tripped up by as they grow, is inventory and stock and cash flow and overstocks and all that stuff that goes on in the actual physical product, which seems to be, I don't get into the P&L of many e-commerce stores these days, but it does seem to be one of the big problems and the big challenges that people come up against is actually managing to have enough stock to sell. How do you help brands solve that problem?
So quite often there is a problem of having enough stock to sell, but also holding too much stock. A lot of the time brands are overweight on stock, and they often don't have enough of their core SKUs, but they also don't have enough cash to buy enough of their core SKUs. And the reason is they have, across the last couple of years, and it doesn't hit you in the face straight away, it's left on that warehouse shelf. And that buy that you made a mistake on, that buy that you maybe overbought on across 2 or 3 years, are still sitting in there. And bit by bit, if you use up 1 million in stock a year and you're sitting on 1 million in stock, technically your stock takes a year to pass through. So you're not going to see that cash back for a whole year. So now, in reality, you probably have a handful of SKUs that you're churning through every 60 or 90 days. However, you also have other stock that probably take 2 or 3 years worth of. And actually that stuff there, most brands are overweight there, and actually could do with, you've placed the bet, it has or hasn't worked. Now that's the stock you use, say, sale times, Black Fridays, and you just clear it back. And all you're worried about doing, you're not necessarily worried about making a margin on it, you're just worried about getting the cost of sale back, cost of the product back to you, to place another bet, to go again, and with another style or another SKU. So the inventory perspective, most people are sitting on too much, and often there is an unlock there, 2, 3, multi-6-figure amount of cash and it's not instant. The problem is it's not instant to change. You need to work on it, and you might need a sale period, a Black Friday, a January sale. But most of the time there is 6 figures in there, multi-6 figures in there that could be unlocked.
E-commerce Master Plan is supported by some of the greatest companies in the e-commerce sector. Here's a reminder of who they are.
The days are longer, the calendar's filling up, and I want to feel as good as this beautiful summer weather. That's why I've been loving Grooms. It's one daily pack of gummies that covers my greens, vitamins, minerals, and even has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, so I don't need to juggle a complicated wellness routine on top of everything else. They taste amazing. They're easy to toss in my bag on the go. Plus, they're vegan, gluten-free, and HSA/FSA eligible for reimbursement. Save up to 52% off with code PODCAST at gruns.co. That's code PODCAST at gruns.co.
It's time for the top tips round.
Okay, I love this section because it gives me and our listeners some really quick ideas for taking our businesses to the next level. Dan, are you ready for the top tips?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, the book top tip. If everyone listening to this podcast agreed to take Friday off and read a book to make their business better, which book would you recommend?
So the book I've chosen is called 12 Months to 1 Million by Ryan Daniel Moran. The title is a little bit clickbaity. So there are some things in there which are along those lines. But the bit that I really like is that they go very, very deep on your ICP, your ideal client's journey. So rather than saying, my factory can make tough fabric, so I am going to make tough fabric for 7 different verticals, you go, my ICP is someone who's just started jiu-jitsu or something. I'm going to say, right, product 1 is the kit, product 2 might be the belt, product 3 might be the athletic tape they need, product 4, and creating that 3 to 5 product ecosystem that person is going to keep buying. And the book goes really deep on it's more important to create that 3 to 5 product ecosystem around a journey of an ICP than saying, well, actually, my factory can produce one thing, so I'm going to do it for this buyer and this buyer and this buyer and this buyer, because buying those new customers, having 2, 3, 4 email lists, is very expensive.
I'm so glad you qualified that decision, because the title, 12 Months to $1 Million, it sounds like the least CFO book ever.
It absolutely, and I ummed over this one because there's plenty of other options, and the safe options you could have hear me come up with as a Profit First or an E-Myth Revisited, but I thought you probably heard that 100 times, and I'm going to go a slightly different option. I'm definitely qualifying it because there is a lot in there which is probably slightly on the old-fashioned scale of product on Amazon style journey. But if someone was just to read one part, it was just focus on that, building an ecosystem around the journey of your ICP, and then they will keep coming back to you. It's not new CAC. They will recommend you to their friends, and that's the thing I really like about them.
Love that. Okay. Traffic top tip. Which marketing method do you either prize above all others or think doesn't get the press it deserves?
Again, as a CFO, my natural inclination is to stay simple first. So if you're a Shopify business, stay focused on one channel. However, inevitably, brand founders do spread across channels. They want to be in multiple places. So remember, from a marketing perspective, to judge the halo effect on the blended marketing. So if you might find that your TikTok and your Meta are creating a low ROI, but if that spend on Meta and TikTok awareness suddenly generates a bump in sales on Amazon, you can't shut the tap on this one, because you have to, maybe you can, you have to assess it as an overall to see whether there is a halo impact across all of the channels. So marketing, don't just shut up a channel based on single channel ROI. You almost have to look at how its impact of your total blended result.
And everyone, that was a finance person saying that. As I said earlier, you get the right finance people in your business and it all makes sense. Sorry, Dan. Okay, the tool top tip. Maybe a collaboration tool, a social media plugin, a phone app, or just a way of working. Is there a cool little tool you use that makes you and your team more efficient from day to day?
There is a tool that I like to bring into all of my DTC brand clients and anyone else I manage to speak to. There's 2 of them. There's an American one and an English one. The American one is called A2X and the English one is called Link My Books. And they do broadly the same thing. I'm sure they'll say they differ, but they do broadly the same thing. And they essentially, so Link My Books and A2X, they essentially automate the Shopify, Amazon, TikTok reporting directly into your financials. So quite often, if your bookkeeper is not a D2C first bookkeeper, find that they're posting net payouts as your sales, and they won't post any fees, whereas this completely solves that. You almost have live numbers in your QuickBooks or Xero. It just works. It's simple. It's cheaper than bookkeeping hours, and your bookkeeper will thank you if you bring it up to them, because they can use on multiple clients. But it just works, and it saves time, and it's accurate, and you get all of the fees, all of the COGS, all of the revenue, all the clearing accounts. Everything's just done, automated. You have to set it up, but once it's purring, it's working really well. All brands should.
Love that recommendation. Thank you. The carbon top tip. What's your favourite way to reduce the carbon footprint of an e-commerce store?
So, CFO answer: buy less and buy right. Overproduction, dead stock is one of the biggest. It's a landfill issue. It's a carbon waste issue. Tighten your buy. Use sell-through data. You can go out of stock occasionally. You're allowed to. You're allowed to, especially on bets, not your core. Don't go out of stock on your core SKUs. But on some of those bets, it's fine to buy slightly less than you think you can sell and then reorder. Don't end up putting it into landfill later. It'll improve your margins and it'll improve your carbon waste.
Probably the biggest and best advice you can ever give on reducing the carbon footprint of anything in the world of retail. Buy the right stock and buy less of it. It's like...
If you can set it up so you can get hold of it quicker as well, not by plane, but you can have if you are, maybe it can get to a point where you're nearshoring, then that can again save. But ultimately the overall aim here is that you can get away with buying less and being able to and selling all of it at full price.
Yes, that is the goal. Dan, thank you so much for all this great advice. Before we say goodbye, please let the listeners know where they can find you and your business if they want to get in touch.
So I talk quite regularly on LinkedIn, Dan Major on LinkedIn. And I write a weekly newsletter. There is a free resource for D2C margin calculator if people are interested in that. But I write about the kind of things that D2C brand founders wish they knew. And if they had a CFO in the room, it doesn't go deep on the finance. It goes deep, like we've spoken about today, it goes deep on actionable insights and tips that they can use to help them improve their business straight away.
Nice. Love that, everyone. We'll make sure you put links to all of that in the show notes for you all. Dan, thanks again for coming on the e-commerce master plan podcast. It has been brilliant chatting with you. So thank you for sharing so much advice for everybody.
Thank you very much for having me.
Doesn't that get you excited about the possibilities of taking a good look at your finances and what it could do for your business? Love what Dan ran through there, getting that accuracy right at the start of it all. He then needs to get to grips with the unit economics, and then it's all about finding the opportunities. Where are the problems? How can we solve them? How can we fix that with different approaches and different strategies? Really loved that chat with Dan. I hope you found it useful too. If you like our dive into finance, because I do think this is the first ever time we've done it, then do let me know and maybe we'll bring some more of it to you. You can get your hands on our notes from this episode, including the top tips and links and all that good stuff, by heading over to ecommercemasterplan.com. You can also use our direct episode short link. Just put ecmp.info/the number of the episode into the URL bar and you'll be redirected straight to the right episode page. When you get to the website, you can also add yourself to our email list so you don't miss out on any of the stuff I share to help you improve your business. If you liked this episode, then one that comes with a surprisingly large number of similar recommendations is episode 586 with Richard Chappell, who's the ex-CMO of Gymshark. And he was doing a What Would You Do all about if you were starting a new job as CEO at an 8-figure fashion brand. And it's kind of more taking a marketing and sales perspective to what we've just gone through. Really fascinating stuff. Definitely worth a listen after this one because it really does build on what we've just been talking about. You can find all our What Would You Do's at ecmp.info/WWYD. Thank you for tuning in to this and every episode that you do of the e-commerce master plan podcast. We bring you a new interview every single week because we want to inspire and help you to succeed and thrive with your e-commerce business, including encouraging businesses and consumers to make more sustainable buying decisions. So if you know someone this show can help, please tell them to listen to the e-commerce master plan podcast. I hope you have a great week and don't forget to keep optimizing.
Thank you for listening to the e-commerce master plan podcast. Find out more at ecommercemasterplan.com/podcast.